The problem is you do see a lot of antisocial people succeed. Loneliness is as big a risk factor for ill health and death.
We live inside our heads.
You go cold turkey, you go into withdrawal.
There is a lot of value in the stuff that we struggle with.
Better Thinking. Conversations with experts exploring all things psychology. Welcome back to Better Thinking. My name is Nesh Nikolic, and my guest today is Dr. Stefan Michalski, who is a research fellow at the National Centre of Excellence in Intellectual Disability Health at the University of New South Wales. His research has focused on the use of immersive virtual reality technology to improve real-world outcomes for clinical populations, with a particular focus on people with intellectual disabilities. Stefan holds a PhD in psychology, where he explored how immersive VR could assist people with intellectual disabilities in developing life skills. Currently, Stefan is leading research aimed at addressing significant healthcare disparities faced by people with intellectual disability. He has highlighted that fear, anxiety, and communication challenges often act as barriers when seeking healthcare. His ongoing VR research incorporates generative AI-powered intelligent agents to support and prepare people with intellectual disability to navigate healthcare environments. These tools are designed to reduce anxiety during appointments, increase healthcare engagement, and foster better health outcomes. Through his work, Stefan seeks to transform the role of technology in promoting participation, independence, and improved health outcomes for people with intellectual disability. It was a great pleasure to be speaking with Stefan today, exploring these topics and his passion. You will most certainly notice that he has a great desire to do good, and it's wonderful to have him as part of a research program looking at how AI, how VR, how technology can help those who are most vulnerable. Enjoy. Stefan, a big appreciation for coming onto the show today. As many people know, I have a passion around technology and all advancements in that space, and particularly in the world of psychology and how technology can be used to improve people's lives. So big thank you for coming onto the show today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Really excited to talk about your interest and passion around VR technology or immersive technology and how that can be used to improve people's lives, and particularly with regards to people who live with disabilities. So I have that shared passion, but I don't know very much in that world. I have never even put a VR set on myself either, so I don't know what that experience is, but I can imagine, at least from videos that I've seen, how powerful and visceral that can be. So excited to find out more.
Yeah, happy to go into it.
Let's start with how you got into this space. I always like to know the background of how researchers, clinicians, academics find their way into their little niche.
Yeah, it's funny. I normally give people the short answer, but I guess we got a lot of time now. So, well, really, it started from my undergrad. So I did a bachelor's of psychology honors. And in the program, I had a class taught by Professor Tobias Locher, and he was kind of just super nice, and I felt really like I wanted to work with him in my honors year. Basically, I was pretty much just keen to do whatever he was proposing and go for it because, and yeah, that was a great decision, I must say. But yeah, so it came to my honors year and we met, and he kind of showed me a VR headset when I had never tried one either, actually. And he's mentioned how one of his colleagues had a VR headset, and I think it was quite a good table tennis player. And he showed me the table tennis app, and he basically explained how it's funny how this app is so realistic. It was great, but no one's really actually tested whether it improves real world skills, like whether the skills transfer from training in VR to real life. So we kind of were surprised by that, given how how VR is pretty much used all over the world at a rapid rate. But there wasn't much research really on the transfer effects from virtual reality to real life. There was quite a lot of research looking at skills built within virtual reality, but not really that transfer aspect. And I guess that comes from our psychology background. That's what we're interested in, like, real world improvements and capacity building. So yeah, that's really where it started, from a sports background. So we did investigate in my honors thesis. We had around 60 participants, and a group trained in in table tennis and with the virtual reality headset, and then we had a control group, and we found that the table tennis the group who trained table tennis and virtual reality had a very large effect over the control group. So we basically assessed real world skill performance pre and post test with a trainer who has over 40 years of experience with table tennis and trains Olympic athletes, I believe. And that was kind of very surprising, and basically was the start of my journey using virtual reality.
It's incredible. What was the control group you said?
The control group was no training. So
okay.
So
just baseline of effectively of the experimental group didn't have any training other than in terms of their prior life, other than going in and using the VR set, and they went against the baseline, which was another group that hadn't had any experience. And then how did you test it? Did you have them play one another, or what was the measure of saying they are improved? Is it kind of error rates, or what was used?
Yeah, so you're testing my memory now. That was in 2019 or 2018 really, but we had 4 or 5 basically skill modalities tested, and these included like a series of rallies with forehand, backhand, and switching over, and I believe some other skill assessments with the trained expert in table tennis. Yeah, and like you mentioned, the control group, that was really, at that point in time, it basically had to demonstrate that foundational knowledge that it is at least better than no training, which is surprising, but there wasn't really much evidence showing that. So, yeah, that was an important first step, I would say, in this kind of work.
Well, it's so important because we all get the assumption is there of saying, of course, it's virtual reality. It looks great, and you're going out and practicing and so on. It has to apply, but until you actually do proper scientific methodology, you cannot unequivocally say this is actually valid and accurate. Did you visually see quite large or differences between the two, the control and the experimental? Could you kind of just see it as a let's call it a bystander, just saying, oh, that's interesting, these people are much better than these people?
That's a good question. But I guess you could. Like I said, it was quite a while ago. But yeah, I mean, the kind of the data spoke for itself in terms of the quality as well. So yeah, we had the quality more so assessed by the expert, which was the most important factor. So by no means am I an expert table tennis player. I think I've gotten a little bit better over time playing in VR and setting up that experiment. I think it is important though that, yeah, because you can obviously see a quantified improvement, but that was an important part to get that really expert rating and their perspective on the quality. And of course, she was blinded to what group the participants were in. So that kind of was really important, of course, to not bias any of the results.
Yeah, fantastic. It leads into that whole next conversation of, what are all the opportunities if we know that it does transfer from virtual reality into real world? What are, the opportunities that exist? I know from a psychologist's point of view, just thinking about all the exposure possibilities of, fears or improving, social skills let's say for anybody, whether that's because there's a lack or an opportunity for improving social skills, or maybe it's a fear-based thing that someone's struggling with so much fear that they are getting kind of entangled and not practicing those skills. There's some very quick, simple ones, but certainly phobias is a simple one we can go and tick our box on. People being concerned about how to sit in a meeting, and the fears and the worries of a workplace meeting. What were the next steps for you? Where did research kind of move to, or what did you start to postulate and think about?
Yeah, well, like you mentioned, is the opportunities for VR basically are endless, and really the importance I mean, people might ask why VR, like why are you interested in that? Like, we can do things in real life, like you can practice table tennis in real life, but the important part is that VR, or really any immersive technology, can allow you to practice things in a safe, controlled, and repeatable way, and things over and over by yourself. So my next steps really from that project led to my PhD work. So my PhD involved using VR to train and upskill people with intellectual disability around life skills. So I wanted to use VR technology to enable people with intellectual disability with the opportunity to learn skills. People with intellectual disability are often neglected in various ways and don't have the opportunity to engage in tasks and upskill. Traditional methods are very costly and require support from people and support workers. And there's also sometimes that it's hard to really simulate things in real life, as that can be dangerous. Ability to practice in VR is going to be safe, and they can practice over and over. So that's really the theory. And I've always had a passion to work with people with intellectual disability, and this seemed like everything kind of just fell into place.
It's so amazing to think about in that way, about the accessibility of doing safe, controllable, and repeatable training, especially for people with disability, because, as you say, the repetition cycle for some skills might be quite high. And I know for myself, in my early training years, I worked as an ABA therapist, applied behavioral analysis therapist for families and who have children with autism. And so much of the work was extremely repeatable, or required great repetition, which was effectively your straight down the line behaviorist approach. I will go out and I'll move a block from the left side of the table to the right side of the table, and then I'll grab the child's hand who's sitting opposed to me, and I'll repeat the exact behavior. And then I'll actually just give them, at a very, very, very early stage, a reward of food, high, obviously, stimulus response. And gradually over time, that would generalize to other rewards, like, encouragement and praise, and, playing together and so on. And the idea was, skill acquisition, but I think there was something in there about theory of mind as well, that the child could go out and see what I'm doing, put themselves into my shoes, repeat what I'm doing from another person's perspective. And I know that theory of mind has at least been postulated to be really important for that client group. And so, to have something repeatable, because this was going on for like 20 plus hours a week for these children. They had quite high needs, or at least early intervention meant let's load up as much as we can at the very front end. I can imagine a gamified version of this would be far superior. The intervals of reinforcement could be very high. They could actually be a high stimulus then, food, and then those high fives and cheering, and maybe throw in the air, some cuddling, whatever it might be, something to go out and really make this sticky. I can see great value for
Mm.
situations like this?
Yeah, look, a huge part of it, honestly, is just the ability, the interest that I've noticed the participants have. So I've worked over 100, worked with over 100 people with intellectual disability. Obviously, uh, not mostly people with autism, but from my experience, like there's very keen to get involved. I would arrive at some organizations and they would see me and their eyes would light up and they would, come running over to me because they thought, we're going to do some VR today. And really what the tasks we were doing were educational. But what it was doing was breaking up this cycle of, you know, uh, typically like mundane tasks that were happening, in kind of the education setting which we worked in. And we were kind of doing education still in virtual reality, but there was that interest and that real desire to kind of do something that breaks up the ordinary activities that go on. So I think that plays a huge part, the motivation. And really for the educators, how do you get that? And look, there's been a lot of interest and a lot of support from disability support organizations and also the funders. The funders have been able to provide us to develop great applications that vary from developing life skills, and now kind of the work I'm doing in healthcare as well.
Well, where this really, I think, starts to lend itself out even further is as technology advances, this opportunity for indistinguishable images to be presented as part of the VR. So it actually starts looking less like VR and actually starts looking like reality. And I know that there are videos right now that are available that I've watched myself that are genuinely indistinguishable. If I was shown 10 videos and half were made by, particular AI software, there is no way that I'd be able to pick the 5 that are versus the 5 that are not. And I get that at the moment, a lot of time and energy goes into preparing those specific videos, but we're on the cusp. And when I say cusp, it doesn't matter if it's 10 years or 20 years or 3 years. We're there. There will be indistinguishable capacity to put on a headset and for many actually have a new relationship with someone. If we have consistency with that person who, has unconditional positive regard, for example, I can still see people running across saying, give me that headset. And when I say people, I'm not saying just people with intellectual disability. I'm talking about the opportunities across the board. I think as a starting point, definitely accessibility and need and merit with those who might be more vulnerable or would benefit from an earlier intervention. Why wouldn't we focus there? But I can see the application of higher technological capacity actually means that what we can do can be more, I keep using the word sticky because that to me, sticky means transfer effects. It can go from the
I like that word.
VR world across. So, that's what I'm constantly doing in my therapy. I'm trying to find something that's sticky so that it leaves the therapy room and it actually enters the client's realm.
Yeah, like I agree completely. Like, the potential is obviously very far reaching, but and as technology is evolving, it's becoming like increasingly more affordable, and also kind of more lightweight. And now we've got standalone headsets. You don't need them connected up to the big computers. And look, it's obviously not affordable for everyone just yet, and not accessible. But that's really the way the world's moving. You've seen Apple now release their VR headset. Given their buy-in, that typically is an indicator of where all the other big companies are going to move towards. I'm not sure what VR is going to look like in 10, 20 years. It could be a complete different thing. Like, things evolve over time. We've seen technology now that are just based with just glasses. where you can do various things. AI. It's pretty exciting, and and that's a big part of it for me too. Like I want to be on the front end of my of this kind of research and providing really people with intellectual disability, a group of people who probably stand the most to gain from new and emerging technologies, but are probably the last people to benefit from these kinds of things.
Yeah.
So a big part of that, I want to kind of provide experiences and opportunities to people that were never really possible beforehand, or just an afterthought that oh, that technology is going to be complex to use, or they probably shouldn't use it, or like I kind of want to provide people with disability uh things that are engaging, enjoyable, educational. Look, I got a long way to go doing this thing along with my team, but it's the way the world's moving, and there's so many different application areas. Um, like the current work I'm doing now involves reducing barriers in healthcare for people with intellectual disability. Um, you know, Regarding healthcare, like uh, the evidence from our department has really uh, shown that people with intellectual disability have higher rates of mortality, higher rates of preventable hospitalizations, higher rates of preventable deaths. And despite these high unmet health needs, they have a lower uptake of healthcare services. Um, there's been research published, which I'm, been reading these last few years, that has shown research published before I was born, mind you, that these long-standing barriers for people with intellectual disability in navigating healthcare, and these barriers include, you know, factors such as fear, anxiety, communication challenges, and what those are things that are on a personal level. So that's what I'm interested in intervening at the personal level. Of course, there's other barriers, including inaccessible communication from the doctors, and kind of short consultation times. Those are things that we can't really control, but I'm interested in intervening at a level where to help people overcome barriers on a personal level. Yeah, the Disability Royal Commission report published that people with intellectual disability, or people with cognitive disability have been subject to systemic neglect in the Australian healthcare system. And there's been government initiatives since, such as the National Roadmap for Improving the Health of People with Intellectual Disability. And they've actually highlighted a strategic action to explore the use of emerging technology for people with intellectual disability. So there is an interest and a need, but I don't really know if there's much of a plan or a way this is going to change without some interest from researchers kind of testing the validity and the acceptability and feasibility of these tools in real world settings.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems like there is clearly a push for the VR space to continue doing its thing. As you say, Apple are certainly on board. Is it Facebook and Apple are the primary producers of these high-end, machines that are actually doing a relatively good job of it?
Yeah, you could say. I mean, HTC and their Vive series is probably one of the best as well. There's other brands of headsets like Pico. Yeah, the technology I've kind of gravitated towards is like the Facebook, the Meta headsets.
Yeah.
Because
well, they've got the biggest budgets, right?
Yeah, well, the fact is, honestly, just convenience. They're super lightweight. They stand alone. I don't want to put heavy gear on my participants, and also going to organizations and things like that. That's just been the most convenient. But yeah, there's a lot of options.
So it makes sense that as the technology does improve, portability, the fact that it's a standalone piece of equipment. It doesn't require it to be plugged into a computer. It doesn't require huge cables. those things are being reduced over time, and battery weight is being reduced. I know the current complaint is that they're a bit heavy. At the same time, that's a pretty good complaint to have, considering what they're achieving, what they're doing. But as that comes about, I think two things are likely to happen. One is they will have greater and greater application, which means the data will go up in terms of adoption. But I don't think adoption will necessarily lean into the area of helping people with intellectual disability. The data will be there, but the application might not. So it requires very specific research. And to be fair as well, it should be research, because if we're going to be applying this for a specific outcome, a specific need that can be met, it should be very deliberate. And if it is deliberately, for example, trying to assist people with disability, intellectual disability, with things like fear, because we know that is a great hurdle, or anxiety, because that's a great hurdle, or improving communication skills, because that's a great hurdle to basically everything. If we can do a 5%, 10%, 20% improvement across each or any of those, they are measurable and would make a stark improvement and difference in the quality of people's lives. And we could say that with any human being, but I think that's the beauty of when it's applied across a big population, and then the research goes in and hones in and says, this is exactly how we can do it for a particular population with specific neurodiversity, that's going to give them the best impact, positive impact. Then we've got, I think the joining of those two beautiful worlds. The tech providers will do their thing, whether it's Meta, HTC, Apple, but the research is then going out and saying, this is how we do it for a particular population, which I think is going to happen across the board anyway. These programs are going to tap into people's personalities, they're going to tap into people's interests, they're going to tap into our different strengths and weaknesses and so on, both psychological and biological. So there's going to be lots of applications. So it really requires a team of people saying, how do we want to focus what these programs look like? There will come a day where I hope you and your team can say, I will take the pre-made VR world of characters, and I'll just select what those characters might look like or give attributes, and it just does it. So I can run the context, but the computer runs the simulation, so to speak. And so we can go out and do great design that might even be individually based per human. So it's exciting once we start getting over that threshold, and many of those small thresholds are, well, not small, many of those significant thresholds feel like they are on the horizon.
Look, that last part you mentioned, that would make my life a lot easier. I think we're going to get there at some point. These companies will make things available that just ordinary people like myself, I'm not a VR developer, but we could be able to customize and create things. We can see that already with our phones and laptops. We can put videos together now a lot easier. Back in the day, that really wasn't that feasible. You had to kind of be a specific producer or content developer, but now it's becoming increasingly more accessible. But yeah, something you mentioned is, even just that 5 to 10 or 15% improvement is so important, especially, for this group. And I think that's definitely something I've come to realize. There's been so much interest from, I get a lot of emails from parents of people with disability that, kind of reach out and would love to try my programs and things like that. And because there's limited opportunities specific to this people with intellectual disability. And yeah, something else you mentioned, like a huge part of what we've done is determine, investigate the effectiveness of these programs. But also the feasibility, but a huge arm of it. And the next step, and really what I'm looking at applying for funding to do, is really the integration into the community and making these things widely available. Look, it's a big challenge. Creating applications like widespread to a group of people who can be quite diverse still. And then tailor, it's difficult to tailor every application to each individual, but this is my thinking too, and it's a challenge. And look, this is really why I've actually, in my latest research study, which we're running now, is we've turned to artificial intelligence and integrating that into our VR application. So the user can interact with AI agents, and this is based really around the effectiveness. Aiming to reduce fear, anxiety, and discomfort in healthcare settings. So the AI, I think, is definitely something that's going to play a huge part in kind of tailoring certain applications to individuals and help with that integration into community, given it kind of enables that tailored approach. That makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think, it's exciting, and there's a strong desire to be at the Holy Grail where everyone has a tailored experience that meets their needs. What's the current programs that exist? What's available right now in the VR world that has hit the ground, is either being researched, is being used? What's the current status?
If we're talking about applications specific to people with intellectual disability, truthfully, not much.
Yeah.
Not much is publicly available. Certainly, of course, there are experiences that suitable to all people. Relaxing experiences, meditation, but not always accessible. So with this population, accessible summaries of using plain English or easy read language is essential. Otherwise information simply can't be read or used for people with intellectual disability. So that's also a barrier in healthcare settings and things. So doctors sometimes can obviously have limited time, and explaining things in an easy way to people is very challenging. So not much is currently available. I'm looking to change this, but I'm gonna need a lot more time and a lot more money from funders to kind of start this. But there is a long way to go.
Yeah. It's so fascinating. My brain is just constantly firing while you're speaking, because the application potential is so huge. Even as you're talking about the medical health world trying to communicate with people with intellectual disability, high anxiety space, complicated concepts to understand. It's certainly difficult. Anytime I go and speak to a specialist, you walk out, half the information is dropped out of your awareness, or you've misunderstood it, misheard it, because of the level of tension and fear in the room, etc. Yet we've got a scenario now where ChatGPT can go out and summarize information. We can record information. I know that my team here at my practice, we all use note-taking software for sessions, and it does an exceptional job. So we're on the cusp of so many of these things. With the VR space, I could imagine being able to walk around in the real world and circle something with your hand, and the machine goes out and reads it, and maybe it actually even goes out and summarizes it to your level of language that's going to be helpful for you, it just has infinite possibilities. But it does feel like we need the Metas, the Apples, the HTCs out there to get it to that application point of view and adoption rate. The cost per unit at the moment, I have a lot of Apple equipment, so they still call me fairly regularly and say, "Do you need anything?" Because we buy lots of gear for our practice, and they've invited me to say, "Come and put on our Apple Vision. You know, you can go out and experience it," which I will do now after this. I've been putting it off because I'm busy, but yeah, it would be nice to see what version 1. And I think it's reasonable to call it version 1 in its almost consumable space, because there's been plenty of versions prior, some not so good, and we could call many of them number 1, but it feels like we've actually hit a genuine threshold where X amount of units have been sold at a reasonable price point for extremely early adopters, not for the population as a whole, and certainly not for people who are already going through, you know, many multiples of challenges, that are the most vulnerable, that would probably benefit from this most.
Yeah, I'm always kind of thinking back to, you know, like the technology and like things my parents had back in the day, and I'm assuming in the future if I have kids and they'll look back and think, you know, what were you doing there? Like that was just so much harder, and it always obviously doesn't seem like that at the time, but I think that's what it would kind of be like looking back, just like, you know, how much harder was that to kind of, you know, it involves the work we're doing now is just so challenging to kind of implement and develop, and you know, so time and resource intensive. But I think these things, I mean, it'd be crazy if they didn't get a lot easier to do and use, and kind of like share things across worldwide. So, you know, yeah, this is a big interest of mine. I hope I can kind of remain kind of on this this path and kind of see how things change over time. And it is exciting, and it makes work enjoyable, because kind of, yeah, it's nice to kind of be involved in a space that's just so so quickly moving, and
Yeah.
with so much, yeah, like you said, I can share the excitement that there's just so much really potential that is still so untapped. So who knows really where we're going.
The evolution is so rapid. There's so many iterations of these, whether it's the hardware, whether it's the software, whether it's the data, whether it's batteries, every single one of those items is pushing it forward, you know, and obviously as the technology goes up, becomes more affordable, which therefore means it's more commercially viable, and around and around we go, which is great. Where does the funding at the moment come from? Where are the sticking points from a research perspective? You know, how do you keep this dream alive?
Look, I think I share a lot of the challenges that most academics do. Funding is very difficult, and it, you know, takes up a big part of our jobs, seeking funding. I was fortunate enough to well, firstly, to develop programs in my PhD from the Channel 7 Children's Research Foundation. So that was from South Australia, where I'm from. More recently, though, the UNSW Disability Innovation Institute, they're a great organization, and, you know, have really enabled us to do all the co-design work, and kind of develop applications collectively with people with lived experience, and kind of identify needs that they have, and we've really been able to integrate that into the application. So without really that funding, these things aren't possible. So also been fortunate enough to receive funding for next year, to kind of progress these things further. So mostly from, I guess, indirectly through government, the funding would come. Yeah.
And what's your current focus? What does next year look like for you? What's the hypotheses that you're testing? What are you trying to figure out? What are you trying to advance? Where's that sitting?
Trying to advance everything. I got a big to-do list. Um, that was some of the feedback I've got recently. Trying to determine priority list, and then realize, okay, it's all a priority. Kind of trying to do everything. But no, yeah. So really, part of the work we're doing in healthcare at the moment. I'll be running a study next year, which is really just going to get some user feedback on our applications. Like I mentioned, we co-designed our applications, and that's really embedded in everything we do, which I sit in the National Centre of Excellence in Intellectual Disability Health. We have great partners, and I've worked with the Council for Intellectual Disability in creating these applications. Like I said, the next step is determining or getting user feedback on these applications. And then kind of funding for next year has been enabled me to test the effectiveness in a randomized controlled trial of our application. So plan to basically continue adapting our work based on the feedback we're getting at various stages. So the co-design process really we started from inception, kind of with no application, all met as a group, discussed what would be like the priority items to include. Then I've gone back and shown them. We had, the first prototype of the application, got feedback on that, progressed again. And then the next step will be getting user feedback. We'll kind of apply all of that qualitative data, go from there and scale it, and kind of keep going until the money runs out. Yeah, so I couldn't tell you exactly where we're going yet, but the current plan really is we've modeled a VR application which basically resembles a typical healthcare checkup at a GP. So this is really one of the biggest barriers for people with intellectual disability, as I mentioned, the anxiety and discomfort around attending healthcare settings. And I mean, these are the reasons why we're seeing higher rates of preventable hospitalizations. And I think, research from our center has shown, I think roughly, without the numbers in front of me, I think 4 to 5 times higher rate than the general population. Research, we've also shown that mental health service use, so people with intellectual disability make up 1% of the Australian population or New South Wales population, but then roughly make up around 6% of mental health service use, and also subsequently 12% of the cost of mental health service use in New South Wales. So from 1% of the population to 12% of the mental health service cost, there is these barriers. So really intervening, we're trying to intervene at the point where we can control things at a person level, aiming to reduce fear, anxiety, discomfort in healthcare settings by modeling a typical healthcare checkup. So individuals would be able to enter the VR experience, and like I mentioned, so we're using AI, and this is basically an input from OpenAI, which is who run ChatGPT. The user will be able to engage in conversation. They will receive like various forms of understanding from various things that we discussed in the co-design sessions. What would be important? What would they feel like would make them more comfortable? They'll experience the waiting area, hearing different sounds, different stimuli, people coughing, sneezing, sitting right next to you, people walking around, phones ringing, noises. And then speaking with the doctor, the doctor, you'll kind of go in the doctor's office, you see the various instruments. You can speak with the doctor. You can, they'll kind of give a run through of all the medical instruments, and you can ask questions specifically about what things involve and what medical procedures, could be done with certain things. And this is all really designed to not induce anxiety, rather reduce and increase healthcare engagement. And then hopefully this in turn leads to reduced hospitalizations and, importantly, reducing the high rates of mortality, which we've seen for a long time, and preventable deaths.
Well, I suppose the hope is through increasing familiarity and the skill set required to sit in a waiting room and then obviously engage with your surroundings and be able to sit with discomfort, uncomfortable situations while you're waiting, and then be able to actually engage in a consultation. All of those things can have varied levels of discomfort, and that could be moderated in a program of saying, let's start with something very easy, make it harder with having sneezing people in the environment, make it harder again, until we've got maybe children running around in the waiting room crying.
We've got that actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's a high suds, right? Like it's something that feels distressing. Kids squealing and screaming and crying. There's a reason why they have that tone. We go to their aid to try and to soothe them, or there could be some sort of danger. That's their form of communication, but it's quite alarming to us. And so having all of those elements, I think, has that exposure possibility, which then allows either for that systematic desensitization, or on the other hand, being able to sit and sit with that discomfort and develop some sort of acceptance of those feelings, urge surfing type of scenario. That sounds absolutely fantastic. There's the other components, and as you say, you don't know where it's going to go because there's an infinite number of things. In my mind, I'm like, you could even have a little voice that prompts what sort of questions you might ask the doctor, at least as a starting point, and then reduces the volume of prompts. There's just so much, that you're like, could be helpful, depending on the context, depending on the person, and so on, and the need. But I can imagine myself putting it on myself, going in and having an aid, having an assistant of what do I need to ask in these situations that it's very complicated, and health is complicated because you tend to be doing health the first time around in most things. Most of us haven't had our third diagnosis of the exact same thing. We unless it's a cold,
Right.
but when we do hit a health condition that's unknown to us, that's our first time. We're doing so many firsts throughout our entire life, and so we're constantly blind. We're constantly vulnerable to all the information and the context and the scenario and who I'll be meeting and the different specialists and so on and so forth. It's hard going.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. Like, there's no reason this only has to be for people with intellectual disability. This concept can be applied for a lot of things. If you don't mind, I'll throw the question back at you. I haven't worked as a clinical psychologist. That was always my aim, really, from my undergrad years, but gone down a different path. What kind of barriers do you find people have coming to your clinic? I guess I've obviously made it to the clinic, so but I'm wondering, I'm sure people would struggle, especially to kind of discuss things that are very private with you and your team. Like, do you see like potential for doing things like virtually, or like how could you see like anything like this being used in your space?
Look, absolutely, 100%. The biggest barrier, which is not going to come as a surprise to you at all, is going to be cost. That's the damn problem of commercializing all of these things.
Yeah.
If we had right now a VR unit that was $25, wouldn't that change the entire world? You could immediately go out and put out a program that more than 1 billion people would own or have available to them, and the data, and then you can do so much research. The rest of it. The great challenge with seeing a psychologist is it's very expensive in Australia, and so it's almost prohibitive for many, for most. And so there's a major problem in the commercial side, which is in actual fact the major problem for basically everything. Healthcare is expensive, and that's not a criticism. It is just a factual reality of economics and how the world works, and capitalism and so on and so forth. And finding solutions to that is very hard, and this is why I find the most innovative things are those that somehow address the commercial problem as well. It's often not a technological problem. It's actually a systems problem, a commercial problem. And this is why that those comments around, having the Metas of the world, having the Apples, the HTCs of the world, them pushing it forward to make it commercially viable then allows researchers to go out and say, this is actually a technology that people will adopt because it's affordable.
Yeah.
At the moment, I'm happy to go to Apple and try this VR set on, but I know it's $5,000 or some nonsense number. There is no way in the world I'm ever going to go out and buy it because I don't need a $5,000 toy. And so it's really challenging. No different to, I might have a bicycle, but I'm not paying $5,000 for the bicycle. Some people will because they're that niche and enthusiasm. We're in a real challenging space, and people with an intellectual disability have got many challenges ahead, and one of them is always going to be a financial one. So they don't have these big, great pockets that they can just go and pull out and get that VR set, or many of the services. Hence why we have an NDIS and so on. But that's probably where so much of that 6%, the 1% population moving up to the 6%. I imagine so much of that is an NDIS probably calculation, where a component of the NDIS package has psychological support. I don't know, but I'm making a big assumption there.
Yeah. No, look, I agree with everything you've said. Like the Apple headset, it's very clear. Like I haven't used one yet, but it's very clear they're marketed towards basically people to assist, with their daily activities, like not really like, to assist with doing your work. Like it's kind of like you can have multiple screens up, and it's definitely not marketed towards like healthcare or anything like that. It's very much it's pretty much a toy, but it could have like great functional use, of course. If you, like you said, if you're into that.
And to be fair, Stefan, sorry to jump in, but to be fair, if the cost was $5,000 and it did what I have set up in my room, I would personally look at it. Because at the moment I've got 3 screens in my room because I do so much of my administration for my work there. And so the value for me of having 3 large screens and portability. So I've got my laptop, 2 large screens, but it also means when I go home, I only go home with a laptop. I'm not willing to buy 2 large screens for home so that of an evening. But if I had that available, I might look at the $5,000 because it actually means I've got 2 large screens everywhere.
Yeah.
Not just at home and at work. I've got it at the doctor's waiting room. So if I'm there and they're running half an hour late, I get half an hour worth of work done because I've got 3 screens running.
Yeah.
If I'm on the bus, if I'm a passenger in a car, all these things, then the $5,000 is doable.
Yeah.
But the program is not quite there yet, but we're on the cusp. And so I think it's reasonable that this is coming.
It's going to be hard to be getting out of doing work soon, won't it? Because given we can already do a lot of things on our phone, and then, if to wear a headset, like you said, in the doctor's office and have all your computers there, and it's going to be very hard to kind of switch off. I don't know the way the world's like the way we're going to be able to manage these things, because it seems hard enough already, you know, you go home and you've got like you still got your laptop. You still engage with everything. I guess in our careers, it's kind of it can be probably hard to switch off. There's always work to be done. Um,
And
yeah.
that's interesting as well. I mean, I'm getting a little bit off topic, but I observed myself this morning and I chuckled to myself as I was leaving my home. I was sticking my earpods or AirPods, my apologies, to listen to a podcast before I've even put my shoes on so I can get in the car and I haven't wasted a single second. The it's so alluring to be immersed in this, and at the same time it asks that question of how mindful are you, how present
Yeah.
are you. This race towards learning or entertainment or whatever it might be is so intense. But at the same time, if we understand that that's what human beings are so enticed by, this is where something like what you're talking about can just be revolutionary. Because if we, I don't like to use the word gamify, but I'll use it. Maybe I just say it's incredibly compelling. It's unbelievably interesting. If something is compelling, interesting, it looks like the real world, it might be
Yeah.
really easy to develop those skills because you've got a program which just says for the next month, all interactions are going to develop on scaffolding improved communication skills.
Yeah.
That would be phenomenal. You know, the
Yeah.
hours of that would be far superior than seeing a psychologist. Far superior.
That's coming from you, so I'm not a clinical psych, but so I'll take your word for it then if that's what you think. So
Look, if
yeah.
some of these things, if they're applied, absolutely. And the reason why is that first point that you said, which is if it's safe, controllable, and repeatable,
Mm.
wow,
Mm.
that's a game changer. You know, skill
Yeah.
acquisition from that level would be absolutely phenomenal.
You know, some of your listeners might be wondering, you know, I use the word safe. You know, some people can have, you know, like falls or, you know, experience motion sickness. These things certainly can happen. You know, a lot of my colleagues have published a lot of papers around motion sickness, and I've been involved in some work. Motion sickness certainly does exist, and you know, typically, you know, dissipates within the brief period after use, if at all. Some people are just more prone to have it, just like seasickness. Yeah, I mean, people almost also might be wondering, you know, like a vulnerable population, like the group I'm working with, how has their experience with VR headsets? You know, like that was an important arm of my PhD, looking at the rates of motion sickness, and they were like comparable to the general population. However, when experiences did become basically when more twisting movements were involved, that kind of did elevate the percentage somewhat. You know, so yeah, I guess overall it's definitely I would consider it safe. But yeah, I wonder when experiences become so immersive and you know you can be walking through buildings or wherever, walking around environments and walking into walls. Yeah, it'll be weird when the kind of lines are blurred between um reality and virtual reality, and then people
Well,
might forget where they are. But yeah.
one of the interesting applications of this, and this is why I think your research is wonderful, is it's always going to have the research will always guide us. We'll just change what the context is. One day, the context I think will be the doctor will put a virtual reality headset on. The person in need, whether they have intellectual disability or not, will put on a virtual headset on, and it will be indistinguishable to reality. They'll be in each other's room. And so you'll be able to still be in their room, having the full experience, but you haven't had to have the waiting room experience. You haven't had the travel. So the accessibility will go through the roof.
Mm.
And yes, you won't have the physical tactile stuff, so some appointments just cannot occur, but many can.
Mm.
And that will be absolutely phenomenal. So that doesn't mean that the waiting room experience of doing the training won't be valuable. It will be, because that's that stuff around still addressing anxiety. The rest of the world isn't going to be a headset world where you just pop it on. You've still got to engage in reality.
Yeah.
We're far, far away from
Mm.
just sitting there like, in the Matrix.
Yeah.
That's not in our lifetime. It's not in another lifetime. It's probably not in 20 lifetimes.
Mm.
But it is coming. I
Yeah.
have to believe it is coming. But the application is phenomenal, because I think we'll just miss steps. The waiting room step will vanish for quite a number of items,
Yeah.
which is phenomenal. We've kind of done that with telehealth now. You don't
Yeah.
have to go in anymore.
Yeah. That's
Hey,
right.
doc, this is what I'm feeling. Da, da, da. We will change your medication. Okay, great. I get a text message.
Yeah.
And the pharmacy gets a text message. I pick up my script from this is phenomenal.
Yeah. It makes sense, right? And just becoming super convenient. Yeah.
But
It
the
would be
motion-
interesting.
You're right. It is going to be tricky, but it's good to know that it tends to still hold the same population variance. Interestingly, though, I think the same population variance would have problems with lots of movements. I am one of those people. I even now as an adult, strangely enough, because usually this thing goes away after childhood, but I can be a driver in my own car, and I can start feeling sick on windy roads. Certainly boats. Let's not go there. Planes isn't always great. I can't wear sunglasses because it makes me feel, sorry, my apologies. I can. I prefer not to, because I don't feel good in them. It makes me feel a similar sense to motion sickness.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't realize that could be the case for some people. Sunglasses,
yeah, it puts a different field of vision, something that's because sunglasses are not flat. I'm sure if I had just pure glass that does not change any fractal, visuals, I probably wouldn't be able to have any difference whatsoever. But there's always some sort of minor change that makes me feel quite uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it would just be the case, kind of like, I guess, not everything's for everyone, and it never will be. And yeah, I mean, I've experienced some motion sickness in my time testing a whole lot of apps, and we even did some work, I guess, trying to induce that in people, not within people with disability, and just kind of assessing like different ways that motion sickness may occur and theorizing around that. That it is super interesting. I'm not really sure exactly what's going on. I'm not really an expert in that specifically at all. So
look, I'm sure one day AI, along with the Metas and the Apples of the world, they will look into it, and they will go and say how, for those who do, there'll be probably a setting that tries to mitigate that to a point. Whether it's possible or not, but I'm sure it will be looked at, because there will still be a number in that population that'll be commercially viable to have that setting. Plus, smart people like working on tricky problems. So, but I think the big opportunity with VR is this, at least from a psychologist's point of view, working clinically, is repeatable. Because once you've resolved safety and that it's controllable, which means you can kind of pick the target behavior or experience or skill, to have it repeatable is where so much of the learning happens. I know for myself, there's been an odd occasion where I have left the clinic room and we've done some exposure therapy. Let's say walk into a shop and make yourself more comfortable by standing next to someone else who's also shopping. And literally in 1 or 2 50-minute sessions of doing that, the generalized skill goes from unbearable, can't do it, too difficult, to in some cases resolved in like 2 50-minute experiences. So if a VR space can go out and do that with a support person, so if you got your support clinician, which could be real or not so, but they guide you in this, and it's indistinguishable from reality. Wow, the sticky factor plus repeatability would be,
Look, I've seen it like with my own 2 eyes, like, you know, that kind of, you know, we've engaged people who are nonverbal, and, you know, sitting in the classroom, you know, is going to be quite challenging, and understanding what's going on really, and the task at hand, you know, paper and pencil task, which kind of is the norm, you know. Looks, obviously that could be great for some, but for some people, like this participant I can remember, I remember they basically had never heard him speak, but kind of once trying the VR and being able to repeat that, he kind of like said like a few words, which is pretty surprising and pretty cool to see. You could kind of tell that he really loved it, and then that repeatable kind of exposure, like we did see kind of improvements in you know, in that work. I think we're really looking at basically use of virtual reality, like compared to paper and pencil learning, and kind of improved effects within the classroom afterwards. And kind of we found basically improved mood, attention, and like overall behavior, kind of in the classroom setting after. And again, the educators were blinded to what group the participants were in. So they didn't know who did the VR or who did the conventional drawing. Sorry, that was the VR experience, kind of drawing in virtual reality, you know, in a 360 environment where you can kind of create and you know, immerse in your own artwork, which is really cool, and use different colors. And there was kind of they really noticed a significant change in this one individual, which was quite cool to see. You know, experiences like that really remind me that this work is kind of important for some, so it kind of keeps me going along.
And what's powerful is the cost of delivery could be almost naught, because we get to a scenario where if everyone's got a VR set and we're like, let's try this, and it's uploaded, and so n=1, you try it. You don't need to even know whether it has effect or not. You just go into that scenario the next time, and you've either learned something or not, but you can try many multiples. That whole world of, you know, OpenAI, ChatGPT's a space where you can, you know, do image creation. We've seen it start doing video creation.
It does.
It will be a scenario where, let's say, a mother who knows their child unbelievably well, you know, I would argue better than their health professionals, and certainly not taking anything away, but they might know certain aspects far better in terms of what sets them off and the conditions. Imagine a mum being able to say, I want to put this experience and create this to be available for my child, so I can learn from how they respond. The investment is high in getting this right. The investment is high in tweaking it. The countless hours that parents would put into this would be unlimited. Right? I mean, we do this anyway for our children.
Spot on.
There is so much available here, and then we will become the drivers to how we can help our children. You know, I mean, classic thing is, you know, kids who are scared of talking in public. That's true for many. I don't care, you know, what your history is, their background is, whatever. Most people have some sort of aversion to that. If we can develop something in addition to what school provides, in addition to what, so these are all add-ons.
100%. It's a
if the
complementary
add-on-
tool.
Yeah, if the add-on is cheap, it's accessible. It's
Yeah.
very easy for me to get a book from Amazon. It just arrives digitally on my Kindle.
Yeah.
Wow.
Another thing, like really, like a lot of people with intellectual disability are prone, like, are subject to restrictive practices, and this really stems from, you know, like, and these are the people that really aren't even engaging in my programs because kind of, they can be quite isolated and, they're at home and then kind of not within the community and experiencing things. And these are actually people I really want to one day be able to help too, because restrictive practices, I guess, typically stem from, concerns from like, guardians and parents that are kind of concerned, for their child that has an intellectual disability, and it maybe in their life had experienced certain challenges in real life, and that the step probably was then kind of, okay, avoidance, like let's not do this, let's not experience this, let's not live life. But I really hope like in the future these kinds of things can be basically, or like maybe we should meet again in 10 years and see how things have developed, but I hope these things can be basically very common and very accessible for people and might build up that confidence to kind of seek out tasks in real life. And, so it's kind of like a bridge almost to various experiences where you can kind of familiarize yourself with, whether it's a setting, whether it's a task, whether it's whatever. And then it might encourage you to go into the real world, and seek connection and seek experiences. And I think that's a huge part of it. But of course, insanely challenging to implement.
There's two primary things that I'm hearing here is we've covered off the need for technology to advance, and then it's really the accessibility that takes it to that next level, because the application rate is high, and if it's accessible, and particularly in terms of what we provide as programming, that makes a big difference. And as you say, if people have got are restricted in for good reason, for many good reasons, the vulnerability rate, I don't know what it looks like, but usually when people are vulnerable, there are also people around who like to take advantage of vulnerability. And so we see more physical violence, we see more sexual abuse, we see more, emotional, psychological abuse, we see more neglect, all sorts of things happen because a vulnerable population usually doesn't have a stronger voice. They can't, vote with their words, with their feet, with their opinion nearly as much. And that can just, be through fear, through anxiety, through not understanding the context, many reasons. And so to be able to do this, all these things in a safe way while it's not, it moves away from being restrictive and starts to free because the environment changes, the context changes, that technology allows for more life to occur, so to speak.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I hope we can get to that point one day.
Stefan, where can our listeners find out more about this space? In particular, obviously your passion of applying, VR, immersive technology, potentially even moving into the AI space, because I think they're so closely linked with regards to people with intellectual disability and those who are vulnerable. Where can we find out more? If you're interested, where are there websites? Are there any resources, your work, if people want to read up more about the work you've already done?
So to reach me directly, you could of course head on to the UNSW staff page, you could search up Stefan Mikowski, and my email s.mikowski@unsw.edu.au. But more broadly, to see the work we do in the centre, the National Centre of Excellence in Intellectual Disability Health, you can head to the website nceidh.org.au, and there should be my project page there amongst all the other work we're doing in the centre. So yeah, I'd love for people to reach out, any potential collaborations or any interest or advice. My email's open, so I'd love to hear from you.
Fantastic. And what's so lovely to hear as well, how open minded you are about, let's just move the needle. Let's go out and help others. Let's use this technology in the best way possible. There's so many opportunities. Let's give this a voice, and see where it takes us. So long as it's forward, I think the work you're doing is absolutely remarkable, and wish you all the best with ongoing grants, because this is certainly a space that needs a lot of work. Yes, technology will move without us, but I think it needs to be guided, and what you're doing is trying to guide best practice. How do we apply this best for people with intellectual disabilities? Because that's what we need to be doing. We need to have it niched to our needs, and hopefully those two worlds come together, where I think there's a natural desire for some of these tech companies to actually do that for everybody, and so why not then be able to lean into that and create very individual need-based programs. So it's an exciting future, and wishing you all the very best, and thank you for coming onto the show today.
Oh, thank you very much. You've summarized that very well, and thank you for the opportunity to kind of share the work I've done and have a great chat. So I appreciate your insights, and you sparked some inspiration for me to keep going as well. So thank you very much.
All the best, Stefan.